Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting the Abyssal Demon from Massive Darkness. So first I'm going to start by just trimming this flash here. It's actually mold lines, I suppose, not flash. It's actually not too bad. There's not too many, and they're in a good spot. I noticed lately a lot of miniatures, they're getting really smart with their mold lines, like where the pieces connect to, instead of just kind of down the middle like normal, that it's actually in kind of more convenient places. So I think in years of old, they'd put this like in his hair or something ridiculous like that. That'd be really hard to trim. But this wasn't too bad. It was actually fairly easy, fairly straightforward. It didn't take that long at all. As you can see, this is not even as long as the spider was. I'm going to start with some Evil Sun's Scarlet here. This is just going to be pretty much his entire body minus his horns or protrusions or, whatever those are. You'll see him around his arms, back, and feet there. But the rest of him is pretty much just all red. It's going to be really bright here just because this is a extremely kind of like sports car red. But I'm going to darken it down. It'll be all right. And I'm going to have to do some fine detail. And for some reason, the coverage on this was kind of odd. I don't know if it's just how I was painting it or it stuck fine, so the priming I think was okay, but you'll see some spots that I cover up. I don't film it all entirely, but it'll be there, so you'll be able to see that. So I'm just kind of trying to see. It's always hard when the model's just all gray, determining where things start and end, especially when all you have is concept art to go on. Normally the concept art is pretty close, but it's not always. And so on this one, I had to make some judgment calls on the feet and legs, especially the legs there. You'll see when I get to that. But the back with there's actually kind of a line where you could tell the hair was not molded on, but pushed onto the actual model. But once it's painted, it looks fine. So I'm not even worried about putting any green stuff there or anything like that. So now I gotta make sure to get his butt there. He's got a well-defined, he's just muscular everywhere. He has, I think, about quadruple the amount of muscles that I have in my body, which says a little bit about me and a little bit about him, I feel. So right there you can kind of see I'm getting around these plates. The concept art, if you recall, when I showed it earlier, just kind of showed this all as dark and brown, and there was a lot of shade and shadow on the concept art. So here I'm just trying to determine where these plates start and stop. The model has a detail for it. It's just kind of a judgment call, I guess, on whether that's just darkened red from shadow or whether it's actually kind of the same horn brown. But I'm going to do it in that brown. That's like a brown gray, I suppose. Hands are pretty nice. The fingers are nicely spaced, so you can really paint in there, which is nice. I do appreciate that. He does have some kind of armoring on his hands, but I decided to do it all red. Otherwise, I think it'd look kind of weird just having like a thumb guard or something like that. Now I'm going to come in here and get his face because with a smaller brush. And I'm actually going to end up doing it a bit more later. You'll see. But with the teeth. And I missed a spot there. See, again, it's hard to judge. Here's some Administratum Gray and some Cavalry Brown. This is going to be mixed about 50-50. I just kind of eyeballed it for the most part, but it's pretty close to 50-50. And this will look a little bit lighter, but it gets the basic color, and then I'll just darken it. Again, you got to realize that pretty much every shade is going to darken the unit, so you have to put the base colors pretty bright. Or at least brighter than you might like them, because they're just going to darken it. But if you painted it darker, like if I added some black to this ahead of time, when I added the shade, it'd just be kind of really muddy, I guess, in the color. It wouldn't pop as good as it does. And again, I'm trying to be a little bit brighter here than I normally paint pretty dark, but here I'm going to try and paint it more like the concept art and less like how I necessarily would. Not to say I'm not painting it like I like. I just, I don't know. I'm trying to improve that. So otherwise, looking at the model close up, you can see it. But if a unit is too dark, when it's far away, like on the actual game board, you can't really pick out the defining characteristics, which is kind of the whole reason we're painting these guys, right? So instead of just pure gray, you actually get this detail work that pops out on the unit because it's different colors, right? So you can see that. So I'm just going around painting every single kind of, I don't know if it's an armored plate, if it's a bony plate, I'm not sure. And then these shoulder pads, shoulder horns, I don't know what they are. He's got horns. He's got plenty of horns. So these are just kind of general protrusions of some kind. I feel like he should probably go see a doctor about that. I imagine they hurt when I don't know if he was born that way or if they sprouted out, or I don't even know what they are, but they make him look pretty sweet. So that's all right. I think they're pretty cool, even if they limit his mobility when it comes to, the throwing fastballs in the baseball team. Imagine he can't put his arm all the way back. Getting in there in that little space can be kind of difficult. I don't know. I guess there's no way to, if I had painted these first, then it would have been difficult to put the tops of the arms red. So, they're just kind of difficult either way. All right, so now we're going to get a smaller brush here just to try and really fill in that little bit. Like I said, it's really hard to get in there, and I don't want to ruin my red paint already on the tops of his shoulder there. So just trying to get in the little tiny crevices. Not too bad. It's just slows you down. It's not difficult. It just is slower work, right? And while I have it on, I'm just gonna go ahead and do the whole horn in that instead of swapping brushes constantly. So that's his side horns there. They're twisted, which does kind of add some peculiar angles that you kind of have to get in there with, but it's not too bad. I once painted a Naga that was like a wound up snake with like a human head, right? And the snake was wound up, and that was, it's cool now that it's painted, but it was absolute torture to paint. You're just kind of having to invent new arm positions. And then his little ear tusks, I don't know if they're actually an ear or a horn. I painted them as the horn, but they're coming out of his hair, one on either side there. And get the other arm, especially that raised arm, it's really hard to get in there. But then I'm going to swap to my bigger brush now that I've gotten rid of that and really put that in. All right. I'm just touching up the little bits there, trying to get every last bit. Moving on to the other arm. So again, with the kind of plates that are on there, they have little ridges. You got to get in there at a certain angle. If you just wipe your brush around, it's not going to work out. I'm going to touch up the rings where they're piercing him and just kind of put his skin where the flesh actually is on those with a little tiny brush. And then a little bit of touch up. You'll see some of it here on the undersides of all of his many, many muscles. This guy has a 24/7 gym membership down in hell, I suppose. Again, getting those little finger crevices and just kind of generally touching it up as I see it. I continue to do that, but I won't continually show it. Get it on his mouth, on his arms. It's kind of everywhere. So here's Lothern Blue and Emperor's Children. I always love that name for that bright pink. I mixed it up. It has more blue than pink, but it does have a little bit there, and that's to get this kind of bright, happy, cotton candy purple color I have here. I don't know if I could have bought a color like this. I probably could have. They make pretty much every color, but I had those two on hand that I don't use too often, but here they are. So, and again, with a purple wash later, this is actually going to show up pretty nice. So right now, again, he's very bright. This is pretty much like the clown prince of hell instead of an abyssal demon. Abyssal? I want to say abysmal, but it's not abysmal. Anyway, his hair is actually, it's finely detailed, but it's not too bad except for that ridge at the top. You kind of have to push your brush in there to get the bottom sides where it comes over. But again, big brush on the whole thing, not too hard, pretty easy to stay clean. Here's some lead belcher. Sounds disgusting, but that's all right. This is for kind of the base coat on these chest piercing ring things. I don't know. I'm not trying to judge this guy's life or anything, but this is not something I would ever condone doing. It just doesn't look, I don't know. It doesn't really look attractive. Looks unpleasant. Here's some Averland Sunset. This is for his beautiful teeth. While he has a great gym membership, he does not have a dentist. I noticed his teeth were pretty yellow, pretty nasty in the concept art, so this is kind of a nasty one. Here's Cassandra Yellow. I've only ever used this once before. This is a bright shade, which is kind of unusual. It actually does pretty good. Again, while it's wet, it's going to look extremely bright and essentially look like I have some kind of candy person here. Once it dries, it actually does a really good job defining it. And notice I tried to go around those rings and decided I'm not going to spend the time, and it completely ruined the color. So now they're like some kind of weird, I don't know, I don't know what that is. It's not lead belcher though anymore, so I'll have to go back over and fix that. That's no problem. Get the hands. Again, big brush the whole time. Not too bad. The brush isn't heavy with the shade, but I don't have to be that detailed. Here's some Reichland Flesh Shade. This is kind of a very light brown with a little bit of orange, and this I'm going to put over all of the kind of reddish brown I already put on his horns and feet and arms. And this I'm putting on actually fairly heavy. I want it to meet the other shade in the crevice and just kind of pull together and create a little bit of shadow where these plates are on him. Hopefully add some depth to it, because the model sometimes does blend together a little too well for how that's kind of on him. I did this right after I did the orange shade. I may have waited a bit to let it dry. I don't know if it would have come out any better or not. I think it looks fine. I love, do you see that? How it just instantly pulls in there? It's my favorite part of adding shade to any unit. It instantly makes it look so much better. Just getting in those little crevices on those kind of shoulder horn protrusion things. It looks amazing. Really stands out. See, this is already looking so much better than it was before. Just that from base coat to shade, it's darn impressive, really, how that is. So again, getting it in there, not being too worried about having it spill out. I'm going to actually add some more shade later on that'll go even crazier than this. So here's this Drushi Violet. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know. That's for his hair here. Again, big brush, just daubing it in there. I actually go a little too heavy here, especially on this side. So this side is a little bit smoother than the other. I don't know why the model was that way, but that's how they sculpted it. But you see those big pools? I'm going to dry off my brush and soak it back in there. Get a little bit less there. Alright, so there's that. I'm going to reapply the rings. This is that same lead belcher, kind of darker silver color. Alright, so I did notice something. I couldn't find my razor blade, but you see that little nub on his leg on the bottom there? I'm going to very carefully trim that off and not trim off part of my finger. It actually does a pretty good job. I was kind of worried it'd be a little too rough or a little too hard, because he is kind of on those little tiny feet there. And a little dab of that Evil Sun's Scarlet again. So there's the Nuln Oil. Like I said, I was going to add another shade, go a little bit darker. I'm going to add these into those deep crevices that he has there. I add them to the outside. I regret that soon after. I will fix that later, so don't you worry about that. But I'm going to actually continue to add it where just kind of where everything meets. And in fact, I go a little crazy on this. So then I'm going to add it to his neck. All right. And then I'm going to no, I'm not going to dump him in it. Add it to his muscular caboose there, and just kind of go around everywhere. Now I have it very in his armpits, I got a little shadow there. And then I continue to do this. So I'm going to get it very lightly on the brush, and I'm going to put it in his little eye holes there. He doesn't really have eyes, but he does have these kind of darker recesses in there. And then I'm going to put it on his teeth, right? Again, not too much, or it would just kind of pool out everywhere. And then with a tiny little bit, I'm going to go in between each and every one of his 1,630 muscles he has, and just kind of trace it. This added a lot of time. I don't, this is like the opposite of highlighting, I suppose, but just adding an ever so slightly amount. It actually looks worse here than it did in real life, because of the bright light on it. It just ever so slightly adds some definition there, because again, it's pretty opaque at this level. You can barely see it, but it's there. It adds a little bit. I actually don't regret doing this. At least not that light part. So I'm going to add it quickly into there. Again, I'm not wiping the brush over everything. I'm actually putting it where I kind of want it, in kind of big crevices and recesses. Just trying to add some more definition to this bright monster. Getting into every single little horn. I'm going to dry brush that same pink-purple mixture, just as the base color. I'm going to dry brush it back on there. Just kind of get the little tips, give it a little bit of a, I don't know, swooshiness there. And then I'm going to add a little bit to his hands. So if you notice in the concept art, he's doing some kind of magic thing, but that's not a real thing on the model, so I just did his hands. This is just with that red. I'm dry brushing where I put that Nuln oil, just to kind of obscure the hard line that heavy Nuln oil did. So here I'm mixing ceramic white with that red. It kind of creates a little bit of a pink, and I'm actually doing some highlighting. This is my first time ever doing anything like this, so bear with me if it ends up terrible. I actually think it ends up pretty good, at least for a first time. So I can actually blame Watch It Paint It for making me feel bad with all of his highlighting that he does. This is my single highlight. I'm not going to do 5 like they sometimes do over there on that channel, but I will do one. I guess I did a negative highlight with that Nuln oil. I don't know if that counts. Again, all 1,000 plus of his muscles here. Pretty time consuming, but this actually added quite a bit. I was really happy I did end up doing this. So I'm glad I was peer pressured into it. Was always worried I'm gonna ruin it, especially because when you first put it on, it's lighter than when it dries. So I had this pretty watered down, and it is kind of a drastic shift, but I'm only doing one. So you're trying to get on those ridges on his hands and his fingers there. Again, this model's pretty good. So I started to do this here on his, protrusions there. Realized I'm never going to do that on all of those little bits on his horn, and dry brushed it instead. I think this was a much better idea. Otherwise, I would have hated this unit and hated him every time I saw him after doing every single one of those swirls on each one of his head. Here's some Screaming Skull. I'm going to add a little tiny bit to his smile there. Some Stormhost Silver. That is adding a highlight that I don't notice. I probably would skip that. And then some red dry brush on those pelvic bone protrusion things there, so it's not all on there. Now, we're finishing up on the base already. See, that wasn't too bad. I'm going to add more glue. Remember, if you recall my giant spider video, I did not add enough, and it kind of made the basing a little lackluster for what it is, though it is a quick and simple basing technique. I just glue it, pour some kitty litter on there, and then paint it, and that's really it. So here's the kitty litter, again pre-filtered, and this one I am able to mash down, which does help it stick. Add another layer, just kind of pour it on there. Make sure it's not on the outside. Press it down so it kind of stays. And, if it wasn't for those blue bits, that'd almost look good right there. Nagaroth Knight and some Macarandus standard. I don't know how to pronounce these names. You saw it there, though. You can pause it and look. And I'm going to start painting it. I want to skip a little bit of this. This is actually the most time-consuming part, just because of all the little bits you have to kind of... And again, I don't want to jam my brush in there. I could probably get a brush. I don't care about it and do that. But instead, I just kind of try and show it some TLC. I got to be careful around those feet there, right? The toes. And I'm going to have to touch up that with some red. I'm going to get it on there. There's no avoiding that unless you use a tiny brush and spend an exorbitant amount of time on such a simple base, which I am not going to do. I don't think it's a good trade-off. All right, so just going to kind of show you kind of the starting of this, and then I'm going to skip on to the end here shortly so you can kind of see me wrapping it up. All right, so here's the end, as promised. Didn't keep you waiting too long on that one. I'm just finishing that up, and then, as you can see, there's all the tiny little sides that don't quite get it, and I'm just going to have to really get in there and just try and get every last little bit. Fairly OCD about this. Here's the Gehenna's Gold. Again, this is what I'm putting all of my roaming monsters base sides into. So I do black for minions, gray for bosses, and then I do silver for agents and gold for roaming monsters. So you gotta remember these are game pieces after all, not just minis, and so while this doesn't necessarily fit the theme, it does fit the game itself. So, alright. Gonna have to do a few layers here. I think it was a little more watered down than I would have liked. But that's alright. Alright. Put the little finishing touches on there. I think it looks pretty nice. Again, I think it looks great once it actually dries on. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a touch up around his feet there, and then I'm going to dry brush with Administratum Gray. If you recall, last time on the Giant Monster I did some silver and was not necessarily happy with how shiny it was, so I did a light gray instead. And this is it. This is the final guy. As you can see, I think he turned out pretty close to what he should be with the concept art. I think it looks nice. He definitely looks a lot more threatening than some gray blob on the table. So if you did like this, let me know in the comments below. Like the video, that helps a lot. Subscribe if you want to see more. I will continue to do these miniature paintings for you guys. And as always, guys, thanks so much for it. I really enjoyed painting this guy. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Take care.